Hey everybody, it's Maureen. I wanted to do a updated bookshelf tour for our this month's video. I know it's been a little while since I have made a video, so I'm gonna actually have a little dollies in here too. This is one that I actually made at the end of 2025. She is like a 20-inch porcelain doll that I actually repurposed. She actually got, unfortunately got a little broken, but was able to repair her. Sometimes that happens. She didn't come in broken. She actually ended up falling over because cats. Which is okay, that happens. But basically I have some freshwater pearls in there, and then I've made a laurel wreath. There's some necklaces, some great pointy trim. I have more than one kind of trim on this doll. I do at some point want to put some sort of trim here yet. I haven't decided what yet. But then I made a little wreath and added some pearls to that too. And of course more of this. This trim I actually got on Amazon, and I think this one as well. These were on Amazon. Amazon has a feature called Haul, H-A-U-L, which basically is sort of their version of Temu, which allows you to get various different things at inexpensive prices. So what I like about it is I can find some sewing supplies, mainly like lace, metallic trims, and things that I would have procured at Joann's that I can't procure anymore because Joann's doesn't exist. Rest in peace, Joann's. But that's one. And then I had done a bunch of little dollies. Basically, these are 1/12 scale dolls that I actually purchased in Lanude. And then used scraps of clothing, or scraps of the silk fabrics from clothing, and then dressed them out. So I have these four. You can even buy them already pre-dressed. There is a company called Victorian. This is Victorian something co. Can't remember it off the top of my head, but I will add it into the comments, well, into the description of the video when I post this. But basically you can buy some of the 12th scale dolls already pre-dressed, and there's even a whole bunch of artists on Etsy that will sell them. They will normally be several $100s, so they're not going to be cheap if they're made by an artist, because you know they got to pay for their time and materials are definitely not getting cheap, which is some of the reason why I mentioned about Amazon haul. I don't normally like to use Amazon as much, but it has its uses here and there. So, getting on to our bookshelf tour, one of the recent ones that I had received was Refashioning the Renaissance. This was recommended by a friend. And it talks about everyday dress, and like I could look up aprons in here, or smocks, or different kinds of caps, things like that. So I have yet to really dig into this one, but it was recommended by a close friend of mine who does also Society for Creative Anachronism clothing. So I do look forward into getting into that. This one isn't mine. It's actually borrowed from a friend. But if you are into cats, it is a good read. Sort of written in the viewpoint of a cat obtaining an owner. This one did cost me a little bit. I either got this off, yeah, I think I got this one off of Amazon, believe it or not, even though it's an older book. Sometimes you'll find the older ones on there. I also like to use ABE books and a few other websites that help me obtain that. But this one is a hard one to get a hold of, so it was nice to actually get a hold of that one recently. Now, I have a whole bunch of coloring books here. So, some Tudor coloring books. Stitch a la Mode is another one which does more like 18th century clothing, but still very, very nice. Very good book. Oh, decorative boxes. I figured that would be useful for making things if I needed to make boxes for like a friend. Shining Threads is one of the new ones that I had received. Written by Anne Juliet Genevieve. She basically has her book on how to do the thing with lots of detailed pictures and patterns. And then this one actually contains black and white images of the patterns that you could practice. What I love about this is because they've been miniaturized to actually fit an 8.5 by 11 book. I'm sitting here saying, doll clothes. So that's what I'm going to do, especially with the 4-part pieces. Yeah, these I could definitely print out and then use them for a doll, probably about this size or so. Anywhere, like I'd say like 16-inch doll would work as well for the size patterns that are in these books. So let me put these back on the shelf here. I actually have room, which is kind of nice. Okay, so a whole bunch more of adult tutor coloring books. And a lot of these I got off of Amazon. So yet again, another good purpose is that you find the detailed stuff like this on Amazon. So a whole bunch of adult coloring books. I haven't gotten into any of them to color yet for the coloring books. This one I actually received through the Society of Creative Anachronism. Sometimes we do book sales at events, and in this case, this I think this person actually had it for sale on Facebook, and I went ahead, put a bid in, and got that. I've had the First Book of Fashion for a while, which is mainly men's clothing, but still very useful. Looking at a lot of the fashion plates that were available in the 16th century. And then, of course, I have some of my fantasy dollies living on top. Sometimes if I'm moving books, they move too. Porcelain doll maker book, Fawn Zeller. She has a nice little book. And then we have Inventory of King Henry VIII, which is actually really great because I was able to find references for 2 or 3 dolls in this book, which is what the bookmarks are for. In Fine Style, which talks about Tudor and Stuart fashion. That one's been out for quite some time, so another very good book. And then I have the 17th century dress patterns book. These are tall enough that they stick, actually they're long, so they actually stick out. So I have them laying this way. But they have a version 1 and version 2. Queen Elizabeth's Wardrobe Unlocked, which I've had for several years. I got this off of Barnes & Noble for around $100. It goes for a lot more now. It's a little hard to come by because it's no longer in print. This was a celebration of an icon for Barbie. This was actually a Christmas gift for my husband. He got this from Penguin Random House. And then I have, there's some witchy grimoire books. And then Edelman Bedelman, which has great images of everyday modern clothing. This one's a really big book. It's very tall, as you can tell, but still lots of great pictures. If you're a visual learner like me, that definitely comes in handy. Second shelf, we have Art of the Doll by NIDA. Their books are pretty amazing because you deal with a lot of individual doll artists. So that's pretty nifty, seeing what other doll artists are doing. Some will be historical, some won't. But if you're into dolls in general, their books are quite nice. Looks like I have some paper dolls and some other coloring books down here, which I can probably move up with the other ones. The Holbein one can stay. Yeah, that's not a coloring book. We'll keep that one down here. But this one I have found very useful. Holbein portrait drawings. this is basically a compilation. This was a former library book because we have the Dewey Decimal System on here. But basically has 44 plates of the drawings of Hans Holbein. So great reference if you're looking for Henrician court clothing. Let's see what else we got here. Some paper dolls. Now these are put out by Dover Books, but not necessarily a bad thing. We have Queen Elizabeth I paper doll. Some very detailed stuff. Definitely have some coloring pages. We have a little homage to Queen Elizabeth II in there. And some history, which is always very good. Fashion of Robert Dudley and what that is, and a few other historical pieces, which I think is great. Let's see. Oh, okay, Henry VIII paper dolls. So these are actually all paper dolls, not coloring books. Henry VIII and his wives. Oops. Goodness gracious. So these are definitely ones you could actually pop out. And then so it will have the wife and then her outfits. And then there's Henry. Oh. And then there's a few outfits here. Here's Miss Jane. And they AB, so that's probably for Miss Anne Boleyn. There she is. Yep. Another Henry, and another outfit for him. And Catherine of Aragon. Okay, and a few other pieces for her. So yeah, it looks like they have it labeled. How much did I get this for? It doesn't even really say. I got this years ago, though. I got it in March of 2015. Okay, so it's been a little while. So this is Henry VIII when he was a younger man, and then his set of armor. Which, actually, all of Henry VIII's armor, or a large majority of it, is in the Tower of London. And I highly recommend, if you are an armor person, oh my goodness, you totally have to go visit that. I'm not an armor person, and I find it impressive. My husband absolutely loved it when we went over there in 2023. Let's see, medieval paper dolls. Looks like Tom Tierney does a lot of it, because he did the one for Henry VIII. And it doesn't look like he did the one. No, somebody else did Queen Elizabeth I. But Tom Tierney did the medieval one and the Henry VIII's wives. So, yeah, different outfits. You know, you could definitely cut these out or photocopy them to cut them out is what I'd recommend, so they stay nice in the book. I would color photocopy these is what I'd recommend if you really want to make the paper doll. And then here's the dolls. We have Maud and Richard. And there we go. In her shift, and he's in his brays. Very fancy. Very nice. Alright, so there's our paper dolls. Well, I'm going to put the paper dolls actually up with the other things. Let's see, great characters from Shakespeare. Tom Tierney, did this one. But this is a sealed one. Looks like I think somebody actually probably cut theirs out and they sealed this. So we will leave that as is. So, excuse me while I put the paper dolls right here. Actually, I will have to find another spot for them. I'll probably need to put them near this taller coloring book right here. But anyway, back to the shelf. Silent Partners actually talks about dolls, believe it or not. but more so like your mannequins and how artist mannequins were used. So some very useful information in there. And then I also have Cabinet of Curiosities, where a lot of the dolls in the 16th century the fashion dolls sometimes ended up in Cabinets of Curiosities, which a lot of the royalty or nobility had these cabinets full of different things that eventually several of those collections ended up in museums for like natural history, and whatever the person was interested in ended up becoming part of a museum collection. Miracles and Machines talks about the very first automatons, which is pretty darn cool. This ends up being the picture of the monk. One, Gallego was the creator of several of these for Charles V. So it goes through Diego Alaca and how he also created them. There we go. Manella Turano. So it goes through all the creators, and then this is the one that, if I could learn clockwork, this is the one that I want to recreate, which actually she still exists, and she is in a museum in Vienna. She's the cittern player. So what she does is she doesn't function anymore, but she basically, her little feet would walk, and then she would turn her head while she strummed her lute. So she actually had a few different features that she did when she walked around. So let me put this back on the shelf. Okay, there we go. One of the other things that I recommend is getting a hold of Thialt's catalogs. So what Florence Theriault, and Theriault is basically a company that sells dolls, mainly collector dolls. And what they do is with each of their auctions, they will create a exhibition book. So I have volume 1 and volume 2 as Dolls as Theater, which are talking about Neapolitan and continental dolls of the 17th and 18th century. These are made out of terracotta on wire, so they are posable, and then very elaborately costumed, as you can see. Normally they'll have items that they're holding or something that they are doing. That was some of the other parts of the doll research that I have done, is sort of seeing about Neapolitan dolls and how creche figures became very prominent in the 17th century. So basically, if you think about your nativity scenes, that's what I mean when I say creche figures. Hold on here. All the books are going squabbly. Okay. Relatively got the paper dolls in with the coloring books now. Alright, there we go. Sorry for the shaky cam, folks. Theater de la Mode, which talks about fashion dolls, and basically after World War II, there was a lot of needing to re-up the fashion industry, because what ended up happening is it was something that ended up taking a back seat, and so this sort of allowed haute couture to start up again, and dolls were a large portion of it. So very cool book, highly recommend. Okay. What we got? Silk Ribbon Treasures. So that's like a ribbon embroidery, another thing of ribbon embroidery, which I always thought was fun. And you can make some fancy pieces for dolls, because you don't need a lot. Miniature bobbin lace, same idea. Foreign Brides from Antiquity is a pretty cool little nifty book that I found. And these are basically dolls that, are more historical based, sort of like your fashion doll. Let's see. And then they'll have like clothing ideas and also a little information about the person that they're trying to recreate. And let's see, when did I order this? Back in 2018. That's normally why I keep that in there. It doesn't actually give me the price on the order slip, but at the very least, it gives me an idea of when I ordered a book. Let's see, Dollhouse Dolls. So this is talking about the 12th scale dolls, like these guys that I was talking about earlier. And then it has clothing. Talks, and mainly you're going to see a lot of Victorian styles with this, but you could easily just fashion a 16th century outfit instead. Let's see, the doll book. What's cool about this is it gives you patterns for cloth dolls. If you wanted to do cloth varieties, you can. Or, of course, if you wanted to sculpt them, you could sculpt them. I think there was some clothing. Yeah, there's clothing patterns back here, too. Some of the reason why I like some of these doll books is that you have clothing patterns, and then they'll give you inspiration for different time frames. Let's see what else we got here. Some other Victorian varieties. Hi, Jace. I'm talking, so he wants to find out about the stuff. Okay, there's some Rococo. Okay, and then here we have some 17th century. So yeah, one of the other things, some wig styling. That's why I love books like this, because it really gives you a lot to kind of go off of. So, and they will sometimes have a whole bunch of different time frames all in one book. Some better than others, obviously. Doll modes. So this goes from 1900 to 1930. So this is more like Victorian to modern times. Even though I focus on 16th century, I like to have books that represent several different time frames, just because you never know. Maybe somebody will ask me to make a doll from the 1930s. Well, I'm going to need a reference for that. Let's see, we got a sketchbook. This one ends up being a bit more Rococo and like early colonial. Age of Dolls. What's talking here? It's definitely more Victorian. So these are really off-brand books. These are things that you would honestly end up having to do a search for on like AbeBooks. Costume Dolls is not a bad one. This is an older, definitely an older book. But yet again, you have a lot of great inspiration images in here. They talk about ballet dancers as well. Nell Gwynn, Charles II, Queen Victoria. So you get some historical, Queen Elizabeth I. And then it gives you an example of what the dolls look like that they created. One that's very similar is making historical costume dolls. It's one I like as well. Between this and then the Brides of Antiquity. Now, a lot of it is black and white, but it talks about wig styling. What else we got going on here? One of the other things I have is the story of German doll making from 1530 to 2000. So this one's been very interesting as well. Looks like somebody else had a bookmark in here. But it goes over the history of dolls and the porcelain making in Germany and things like this. It'll even go back to this doll that still exists and is from about 1530. It's carved out of wood. So that one is interesting. They even have a big version of that book, which it is bigger and thicker. And then I go into my fashion books. So I have fashion in detail from the 17th and 18th century. Excuse me. I do have a history of Britain and Ireland. So sometimes having these kind of books is useful just for the reference of what was happening in history at the time besides what was going on with the fashion. Hold on here. Oh, also very useful. Chronicle of Western Costume, or a very similar books where it goes through several different time frames of clothing. If you're making dolls and you need to have reference of what the clothing looked like from different time frames, what's kind of cool is this gives you, yes, what they look like, but then you're also getting descriptions about each one and the relative time frame, and it labels them out as to what you're looking at. So this one is nicely laid out. Definitely a good one. And it's a nice size. So this is your, typical like 8.5 by 11 sort of size book. Cut for fashion, cut of women's clothes. So by Nora Wall. Let's see. Dress at the court of Henry VIII. This is mainly a research book. But yet again, since this is something that I study, that's been particularly useful. And then we go into the Tudor tailors. Dun, dun, dun. So I have Queen and King's Servants. Typical Tudors, one of their newest ones, which goes over clothing that is more modern clothing. As you can tell, I have certain bookmarked areas. A Tudor Child goes over children's clothing from the time frame. And it does actually have a fashion doll pattern here on page 150 that I absolutely adore and use on a regular basis. And then we have the original, the Tudor Tailor. This is first edition book, and this is a Pensick present that I bought myself at my first Pensick. So, and surprisingly enough, it's in pretty decent shape considering it has traveled with me all sorts of places. And then this is from the Metropolitan Museum, where they had a whole bunch of Tudor images and paintings and an exhibition. I didn't get to go to the exhibition, but I bought the exhibition book. And then what else we got here on? We have Tudor Fashion by Hilary Lynn, and then we also have her Tudor Textiles book. So still very useful stuff to do more research on clothing itself. This is more reference material from the images from the time. There was also an exhibition called The Six Lives, which talks about the wives of Henry VIII. And so this is another exhibition book that I decided that I needed in my life. National Portrait Gallery put this one on. And then these are actually like the wax figures that they have at Madame Tussauds, I think, did these, but I could be wrong. But the figures very much look like the queens and are dressed up, based off of their Holbein portraits. So one of the other ones I recently obtained was Moda La France from 1540-1580. So this is more like continental clothing. But yet again, another historical clothing book. Has lots of great reference material. Oh, let me see here. Hold on just a moment. Put the books back in a relative order here. All right, so that is the end of bookshelf number 2. Down to bookshelf number 3. A lot of these are pieces that are written by other researchers. So when I went over, when I went over to London in 2023, I got several of these books that you could get from different museums or places. So I have the Hampton Court Palace book, the Tower of London book, which was fantastic because we got to, because it was just after the coronation, the Jewel House had a great display going on with that, and then a general Tower of London book. So got these souvenir books from those locations when we went over. And then Kentwell is a recreation. They do like a Tudor recreation during the summertime. Then they also do like World War II. They also wrote a recipe book. So they have their own little book of fun stuff as well. And I have Barbara Berman and Adrienne Fruteau's The Pocket. Serena Dyer's Material Lives. Sarah Bendall's Shaping Femininity. So these are really books written by other researchers that I have enjoyed, that is just full of information and images that if I needed it, it's here kind of thing. And these were not that expensive. They were actually a fairly decent price. This one's put out by Yale Press. The other two look like they're put out by Archer Press. A Compendium of Common Knowledge, just because I wanted to know more about Elizabethan and Tudor times. This was sort of helpful in that respect as well, just to have, not that I'm expected to talk with an English accent or reenact anything in particular within this SCA, but I think it's important to know information from your time frame. Clothing of the common sort, and then I have fashioning the early modern. So a couple other books that these are from Oxford Press, that are sort of useful on that case. And then I have a few pieces of dress codes and one on fabric. I found these actually at our local Barnes & Noble. Also African Europeans, which I am still in the process of reading, but very, very good book. And then after I'm done with that, I'm going to actually read the 1619 Project. So there is some, there's that. When Women Ruled the World. So it talks about the queens, 16th century queens. And then I have a few other books like Gerard's Herbal, which was actually, this is a reprint of an herbal that was very popular in the 16th century. What else we got here? A Medieval Health Handbook. Same sort of idea here is a copy of the book that people would have used back then to make themselves better if they needed to. Heirloom Gardens. Because I am a horticulture major, so sometimes I want to have books on plants that are about the 16th century. A dyer's garden, if I wanted to plant plants to do dyeing of wool, because I do have plenty that I could actually do. Tudor folk tales, a Tudor treasury, and there's homegrown flax and cotton. I'd like to do that at some point, but I think I'm probably going to have to use the community garden for that, because they don't like you to grow crops in your yard in the borough that I happen to live in. Homegrown wisdom from the Old Farmer's Almanac. So, and then let's see, a Medieval Home Companion. So a lot of little knowledge books that I wanted to have just about the time frame that I'm interested in. I haven't gotten to read all of these, but it's nice to at least have them there for when I'm ready to dig right in. the next bit of books. This one I actually got from a friend, Treasures in Needlework, when they were cleaning out their library. This one I actually happened to find at a local antique shop, Dressmaking Made Easy. This one I actually got from, I think I got that from Penguin Random House. And then these I actually got Ladies Guide to Plain Sewing, Book 2, and Tailoring and Stitching Techniques. I got these off of Burnley and Trowbridge's website. And then this is another thing that I actually located, I think, on eBay. So it's a Women's Institute of Domestic Arts and Sciences from Scranton, Pennsylvania. So that's local. And they basically had books on cutting and fitting, dressmaking, harmony and dress, directive stitches, and dress trimming and finishing. So from a own institute, Women's Institute in my local area actually published these little books, which I think is brilliant, you know, because not everybody knows everything. So, and their bindings and the way that it's made on the outside, they actually are pretty darn good. They've lasted over the years. Fancy Fashion in the Time of William Shakespeare. So there's a little something. Patterns of Childhood, which talks about doing samplers and stitching for that. So these are all my stitching books, if you want to think of it that way. So I have those sort of down here on the bottom. So I try to kind of group them by topic, which mainly, you know, put the garden books and the home wisdom books together. And then put the needlework books and, you know, all together kind of thing. Let's see here. Those are have to go in the corner. Let's see if I can get this in here. It should actually fit. This one's a little snug, the cotton and linen one. It fits, but it is just barely. So that's the third and final shelf of the bookshelf tour. I know that there's a lot of shaky cam. I do apologize for that. That is the books that are currently residing on my bookshelf. I do actually change them out seasonally, depending on what I'm doing. The middle shelf tends to be the most consistent because the Tudor books, the history about fashion, and the fashion pattern books like Tudor Tailor, they just live on the shelf perennially. And sometimes the books up here will change a little bit, but not by a lot, really. But anyway, that is the bookshelf tour. If you have any questions, you can message me or leave it down in the comments, and I will do my best to answer your question in a timely manner. If you liked this kind of content, please consider liking the channel and subscribing. I do my best to upload once monthly. We have dolly and historical fun here. And I will see you on my next video. Take care. Bye-bye.